One of your most frequently asked questions about getting started in the laundromat business is, how much money do I need and where do I find it? Well, it's a good question. Financing is a big part of this industry. It can be a capital intensive business, and so chances are you're going to need some resources to help make this project happen. So I'm going to spend a few minutes here walking through the different resources that you can use to access financing and give you some sense of how much money you're going to need in the end. So let's start about resources. Now, some of you may have a real strong balance sheet. You're in other industries, you've got real estate, you're going to stroke a check. Hey, good for you, that's fantastic. Some of you may have an existing relationship with a commercial bank where you have done loans before, you know each other, you can plug in and you're good to go. Most of the people that we interact with here at Coin Laundry Association need a little bit more help than that. And so there's a few resources that you can look at. A lot of people bring up the SBA. You know, the SBA is great, Small Business Administration. They do lots of small business loans. Of course, you need to plug in with a local banker. So part of that process is to find a banker locally that has an expertise in SBA. I call it an SBA guide, an SBA Sherpa. You need someone who knows the paperwork, knows how to kind of wind through all the different considerations at the SBA. And the SBA generally likes the laundromat business. They have experience with it. So that's another consideration in terms of where to source the financing. Probably the most prominent in our industry would be in-industry or captive lenders. These are laundromat-specific lenders where, because we're a small business, and because we're a small business that maybe not a lot of people know much about, because we have a lot of people that want to get in the business that don't have experience to show a conventional lender, we've created our own credit facility within the industry where there's been billions and billions of dollars of equipment loans and acquisition loans that have been made from within the industry. So often these are companies that are either owned or are closely affiliated with one of the equipment manufacturers. And there's also a number of independent laundromat finance companies that have good relationships with the equipment manufacturers. And again, because we're a small business, because you may not have experience, it's nice to have a resource that knows the industry and might be more friendly to making the loan based on that industry knowledge and frankly their desire to sell you some washers and dryers. So in terms of resources and where to look, you may have your own resources. You may look outside to something like the SBA, small bank in your area, but a lot of people look at the captive lenders in our industry as a resource. And again, you can find a listing of those folks at coinlaundry.org. So that's kind of where you find the money, but let's back up and talk about how much money do I need? Well, an acquisition, you see stores for sale for 100 grand, you see them for sale for 2 or 3 million. You know, there's really no average there. It's scaled based on the size of the laundromat, the age and condition of the equipment, obviously the net profitability. So you're gonna see that all over the board. But I think maybe what is more helpful is what is the typical down payment on that type of acquisition. So if you're going through the SBA, maybe that's only 10 or 20%, but there's a lot more hoops to jump through. But an acquisition, that wouldn't be unusual. If you're going through one of the captive lenders, that's probably something more like 30 or maybe even 35% down on the acquisition. Because you look at it from the lender's perspective, they want to make sure you've got some skin in the game, right? You're putting some cash into the deal and that you're going to be highly motivated to make that business successful and repay the loan. You know, another resource that people sometimes stumble across would be what I would call seller financing. That's where the seller of the business is willing to work with you and they are the bank. Okay, we need a down payment, we're gonna set up a payment schedule, I'm gonna work with you, and that way they have a little bit of connection to the business, they can earn a little bit more beyond the sale price in the form of interest on that loan, and maybe it helps kind of bridge that path for you. Don't be surprised if those arrangements require that 30% or maybe even higher, because if you're thinking about it from their perspective, they want to make sure that they get their main chunk, maybe as much as 40% right off the top, because they may have to settle loans themselves, they may have to settle taxes, but at least put you on that path toward ownership. When it comes to build out, and I think it's easiest to talk about this in the form of a per square foot cost. So let's talk about no real estate. Let's assume you're going into a vanilla box or an existing space that is being used for another purpose, and you need to do the leasehold improvements, maybe upgrade the utilities. You need to buy the equipment, install the equipment, do all the finishes, and make it ready to go. Again, that's going to vary based on the project and the part of the country that you're in, but I would definitely start at least $300 or $400 a square foot as your estimate there. Again, build out, equipment, installation, open for business. But don't be surprised if you see a $500 a foot number thrown at you. It's like everything else, it's getting more expensive. And at least that way you can start to look at, well, Brian, I'm going to do a 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 square foot store. You can start to calculate, at least in broad terms, what that's going to cost you. Of course, anything short of a real bid on a real project is just an estimate. But in this video, I wanted to give you a sense of how much money do I need and where does it come from? And hopefully I've given you some ideas of where you can get started. So with that, thanks again for joining us at Laundromat FAQ, and we'll see you next time.